The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. One moment I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a mug of coffee I had just poured, and the next I felt the flat of my daughter-in-law's hand across my cheek. Not a slap born of panic or accident. Deliberate, measured, the kind that says I have been wanting to do this for a long time. The coffee hit the floor. I didn't move. She stood there in my kitchen. The kitchen I had built with my own hands when I was 32 years old. The kitchen where my wife Margaret had made Sunday roasts every week for 26 years before the cancer took her. And my daughter-in-law looked at me like I was furniture she was tired of working around. "You had no right," she said. "That account is ours." My son was standing in the doorway. He didn't say a word. His name is Robin. He is 41 years old. I held him in this same kitchen the night he was born because Margaret's labor came faster than we expected and we didn't make it to the hospital in time. I cut the cord myself, shaking so hard I could barely hold the scissors. I have loved him every day of his life. He watched his wife slap me, and he looked at the floor. I set what was left of my coffee on the counter. I walked to the window. Outside, the sugar maples along the back fence were just starting to turn. That deep October red that always made Margaret stop whatever she was doing and just look. I stared at those trees for a long time. "Lorraine," I said without turning around, "I think you should go upstairs." She laughed, actually laughed. Then she walked out of the kitchen, and her footsteps went up the stairs above my head. And I heard the bedroom door close, and my son was still standing in the doorway. "Dad!" "Not now, Robin." I poured a second cup of coffee. I drank it by myself at the table, and I thought about the folder in the locked drawer of my desk upstairs. The one I had been quietly adding to for almost 14 months. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this started with the slap. The slap was just the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. Robin met Lorraine at a conference in Calgary 6 years ago. She was sharp, well-dressed, laughed at the right moments. I liked her at first. I am not the kind of man who makes up his mind about people quickly, and I tried hard to see what my son saw in her. They married 18 months later at a small ceremony out in the Okanagan. Just family and close friends. And I paid for most of it because Robin was between jobs and I didn't want them to start their life together under a pile of debt. That was my first mistake. Not the generosity. The precedent. After the wedding, they were living in a one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver, and Lorraine kept making small comments about space, about the city being expensive, about how lucky it was that Robin's father had such a beautiful big house sitting half empty out in Kelowna. At first, the comments were light, passing things. Then they got a little heavier. Then one Sunday in March, 3 years ago, Robin called me and asked if they could move in. Just for a year, he said. Just to get on their feet. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It was my son. They arrived with the moving truck on the 1st of April. Lorraine walked to my house that first afternoon like she was doing an inspection, opening cupboards, noting things. She had a way of tilting her head at objects she found inadequate. An old lamp, my set of mismatched dishes, the lazy boy in the living room where I liked to read, and I told myself it was just her way. People have different ways. By summer, she had rearranged the living room. By fall, she had replaced the lamp. By the following January, she had quietly moved most of Margaret's things. The small shelf of cookbooks, the framed needlework, the cedar box that sat on the mantel, into a cardboard box in the basement. When I asked about the cedar box, Lorraine said it made the space feel cluttered. That cedar box had Margaret's handwriting on a piece of paper inside it. A grocery list from the last week she was well enough to go shopping. Milk, apples, rye bread, the good cheddar. I had kept it for 12 years. I spent 34 years in construction management, and the one thing this industry teaches you. Night I had least expected him to be. He had grown into someone who needed peace more than he needed truth, and Lorraine gave him peace by controlling everything around her, which meant that my son had quietly become her most useful tool. He didn't disagree with her. He didn't disagree with her. He didn't disagree with her. He just smiled that careful smile he had developed. The one that meant he had already decided not to be present for whatever was about to happen. The money trouble started in the second year. I am a retired civil engineer. I worked for 31 years for the provincial government, and I was careful with what I earned. My pension is modest but solid. I have a house that is paid off, a truck that is paid off, and RIF I converted from my RISPs at 65 that gives me a reliable monthly draw. I am not a wealthy man, but I am a comfortable one, and I have enough to leave something meaningful to Robin when I go. Lorraine knew exactly what I had. I don't know how. I suspect she found statements when I wasn't looking. But she knew. And once she knew, the ask came. Not all at once. That's not how it works with people like Lorraine. It came in layers, the way water gets into a foundation. First, it was help with Robin's car. Just a loan, will pay you back. Then it was Lorraine's dental work, because her insurance didn't cover the full amount. Then it was a business opportunity that Robin had gotten excited about. Something to do with short-term rental properties in the interior of BC. And could I come in as a silent investor? I gave them the money for the car. I helped with the dental work. I told Robin I would think about the investment. While I was thinking, I started paying attention. I have a friend named Walter who retired from the RCMP 10 years ago. We have known each other since our kids were in minor hockey together. And he is one of those men who is very quiet and very observant and who notices things most people miss. I called Walter in late October of that second year and I told him what was going on. He listened without interrupting. He always listens without interrupting. And when I finished, he said, "How much do you trust your instincts on this, Raymond?" I said I trusted them completely. He said, "Then let's be careful and let's be thorough. I want to be clear. I didn't hire anyone. I didn't spy. I didn't go through anyone's phone. Everything I learned over the next 14 months, I learned from public records, from conversations I was present for and had every right to hear. And from a very sharp family lawyer named Patricia Hewitt, whom I had first consulted when Margaret was diagnosed, and we needed to put our affairs in order. Patricia had known our family for 16 years. She was the kind of lawyer who thought 3 steps ahead and asked questions that made you feel uncomfortable in the most useful way possible. The picture that emerged was not a single dramatic revelation. It was more like a puzzle assembled from 100 small pieces, each one unremarkable alone but unmistakable together. The short-term rental business Robin was excited about? Lorraine had already incorporated a numbered company in Alberta 6 months before Robin mentioned it to me. The company had an address I didn't recognize and a registered director who was not my son, and not Lorraine but someone I eventually identified as Lorraine's cousin from Abbotsford. The business, Patricia told me after reviewing the incorporation documents, was structured in a way that would have made it very easy to route money in as an investor loan and very difficult to trace where it went after that. There was more. Robin's car loan that I had helped with. I discovered the car had been refinanced 3 months after I gave them the money, with a new loan from a credit union in Vernon. The original amount I gave them didn't appear anywhere in Robin's finances that I could see. It had moved somewhere. And then there was the question of my house. In November of the second year, Lorraine sat down with me at the kitchen table one evening after dinner with a folder of papers and a very rehearsed kind of warmth. And she explained that she had been thinking about my situation, my age, the upkeep of a large property, the uncertainty of the future, and that she had spoken to a financial advisor who thought it might make very good sense for me to transfer the house into a family trust. For estate planning, she said, for probate savings, to protect the asset from being eaten up by fees when I was gone. The papers in her folder were already drafted. I picked up the folder. I looked through it slowly. She watched me read. The trust she was proposing would have transferred the beneficial ownership of my property to a trustee. That trustee was Lorraine. I set the folder down. I thanked her for thinking of me. I said I would have my own lawyer look it over. She smiled. It did not reach her eyes. I called Patricia the next morning. Patricia used a word I won't repeat here, and then she got very professional and very precise. And she told me exactly what that trust document would have meant and exactly what I should do next. I kept everything Lorraine had given me. I kept notes. I kept dates. I built a folder of my own. That folder sat in the locked drawer of my desk for 8 more months before Lorraine put her hand across my face in my own kitchen. After the slap, I gave myself 3 days. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't change my behavior. I made dinner as usual. I watched the hockey game as usual. I said goodnight as usual. Lorraine was careful around me those 3 days. Not apologetic, but careful. The way someone is careful when they're not sure how much damage they've done. Robin tried to talk to me twice. Both times I said I was fine and changed the subject. I needed him to believe that nothing had shifted. On the 4th day, I called Patricia. I told her I was ready. Patricia said, "Let me make some calls." What happened next took 6 weeks to arrange, and it required a kind of patience I didn't know I still had. But I had something to focus on, and focus has always steadied me. Margaret used to say I was the least excitable person she had ever met in an emergency. She meant it as a compliment mostly. During those 6 weeks, two things happened that Lorraine did not know I knew about. The first was that she approached my neighbor Barry. We've been neighbors for 20 years, our kids played together. He plows my driveway in winter, and she asked him whether he had ever thought about the value of the properties on our street, and whether he knew anything about my plans for the house. Barry told me about it the same afternoon over the back fence, looking embarrassed on her behalf. The second was that Robin came to me privately one evening when Lorraine was out, and he sat down at the kitchen table and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He said he needed to talk to me about something. He said Lorraine had been pushing him hard to get me to sign some documents before Christmas. He said he wasn't comfortable with it and he didn't know what to do. I looked at my son for a long moment. There was the boy I had raised somewhere behind his eyes, tired and lost and looking for his father. I said, "Robin, do you trust me?" He said yes. I said, "Then don't sign anything, don't say anything, and let me handle this." He started to ask what I meant. I said, "Trust me." He nodded. He went upstairs. I sat alone for a long time, and I thought about what it costs a person to lose their way and what it costs another person to watch it happen. And I thought about Margaret, and I thought about what I owed my son, and I decided that what I owed him was the truth. But the timing of the truth mattered. I told Lorraine I was planning a dinner party. I chose the second Saturday in December. I told her I wanted to do something proper. A real sit-down dinner, nice table, good wine, the works. I said I had some old friends coming. People I hadn't seen in a while. People I wanted her and Robin to meet. She lit up at that. She loved the idea of her dinner. She immediately started talking about the menu, about the table setting, about what she might wear. I let her plan all of it. I said that was a wonderful idea, that she had much better taste than me, that I trusted her completely. I watched her become excited about the event where her own story would end. On the night of the dinner, she dressed beautifully. She set the table herself. My good tablecloth. The candles from the hutch. The wine glasses I had bought years ago and never used. She looked around the room when it was done with a kind of satisfaction that I understood. Because the room genuinely did look beautiful. She had real ability, Lorraine. That was never the issue. The issue was what she did with it. The guests arrived at 7. Patricia came first with her husband. Then Walter with his wife Janet. Then a young man named Andrew who worked in Patricia's office and who had spent the better part of those 6 weeks very quietly preparing documents. And then, last, someone Lorraine had not expected, my brother Frank, who lives in Halifax and whom I had called 3 weeks earlier and asked to please come to Kelowna for a dinner. No questions yet, just trust me. And Frank, who has never once in 63 years failed to show up when it mattered, had driven himself to the airport and flown across the country without asking why. Lorraine stood at the edge of the dining room and looked at the table and then at me, and something shifted behind her face. Not panic yet, just the first cold recognition that this was not the evening she had planned. We had dinner. The food was excellent. Lorraine had ordered from a very good caterer in town and I had paid for all of it without complaint. We talked. Walter told a story about a fishing trip that made everyone laugh. Frank told my brother-in-law's story that I have heard 40 times and still find funny. The wine was good. It looked, from the outside, like exactly the kind of evening I had described. After dinner, when the dishes had been cleared and the coffee was on, I asked Lorraine if she would come into the sitting room. I asked her to bring Robin. I asked the others to join us when they were ready. In the sitting room, I had laid out 3 things on the coffee table. The first was Lorraine's folder, the one she had brought to this very table 14 months ago, with the trust documents already drafted, with my name waiting for a signature. The second was my folder. 14 months of notes records, copies of incorporation documents, screenshots of public filings, a letter from a forensic accountant Patricia had engaged, a statutory declaration from Barry about the conversation at the fence, and the careful accounting of every dollar I had given Robin and Lorraine, and where, as best as could be traced, those dollars had gone. The third was a single document that Andrew had prepared, a formal notice drafted by Patricia's firm, that Lorraine and Robin were required to vacate the property within 60 days, that all financial arrangements between us were terminated effective immediately. and that any further attempt to access, transfer, or encumber my assets would result in a refer to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. And Walter, who was now leaning in the doorway with his coffee, smiled very faintly when I mentioned that part. Lorraine did not speak for a very long time. Robin looked at the table. He looked at me. I watched him read the document slowly and then read it again, and I watched his face do the long, painful work of understanding not just what Lorraine had done, but what he had allowed, what he had chosen each time to not look at. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. I said, "I love you, Robin. That is not in question. It will never be in question." I said, "But I will not sign my name to anything in this house until you are both gone from it." Lorraine found her voice then. She said things I will not repeat. She said I had humiliated her, that I had tricked her, that I had no proof of anything, that Patricia was clearly biased, that Walter had no jurisdiction, that the documents meant nothing. Patricia, who had been sitting quietly on the aloof side with the patience of someone who has done this before, said, in her mild and precise way, that she was welcome to consult her own counsel and that Patricia was looking forward to that conversation. Lorraine left the room. Her footsteps went up the stairs, the same stairs she had walked up after slapping me. I heard the bedroom door. I heard drawers. Robin sat in the chair across from me for a long time without speaking. Eventually he said, "Dad, what do I do?" I said. "That's not for me to answer, son." He said, "I didn't know how bad it was." I said, "You knew more than you let yourself know." That was the hardest thing I have said to another person in a long time. It landed on his face the way the truth sometimes does. Not like an accusation, but like a door opening onto something that has been locked for years. He closed his eyes. He nodded once, very slowly. They were gone in 38 days. Not 60. 38. Lorraine moved quickly when she understood the situation. She had somewhere else to go. Her cousin in Abbotsford, it turned out, the same one whose name appeared on her numbered company. And she went there with 2 carloads of things that included, I noticed, several items that were not hers. I made a list. I let it go. Some battles are not worth the cost. Robin moved into a short-term rental in Kelowna. He called me on the 3rd day. He was very quiet on the phone, the way he used to be as a teenager when he had done something wrong and didn't know how to start. I spent 13 this industry 34 years in construction management. I spent 34 years in constructor. I made the roast chicken that Margaret used to make, the one with lemon and rosemary, the one that smells like every good Sunday we ever had in this house. We sat at the kitchen table, the 2 of us, and we ate and we talked and we didn't solve anything. But we started. That's what matters. You start and then you keep going, and eventually the distance between where you are and where you need to be becomes something you can manage. He is not with Lorraine anymore. That happened on its own, faster than I expected. I did not celebrate it. I had not wished failure on their marriage. I had only wished the truth into the room, and the truth did what it always does when you finally let it. My house is quiet again. The cedar box is back on the mantel where it belongs. Some mornings I make coffee and I stand at the window and I watch the light come up over the mountains, and I think about Margaret, and I think about what she would say about all of it. She would say I waited too long. She was always faster than me. Faster to see things, faster to act, faster to trust herself. She would have had Lorraine's number inside the first month, and she would have said something in a quiet, direct way that would have stopped the whole thing before it got started. But Margaret is gone, and I am here. And I did the best I could with the man I am. There is a chair at the head of my kitchen table. I sit in it every morning with my coffee. It is not a grand chair, just a wooden one I bought at a garage sale 20 years ago, slightly uneven. One leg a little shorter than the others. Margaret used to joke that the table was the same way, that we were a matched set. I used to think dignity was something you announced, something you stood up and claimed in a loud moment. I know now that it isn't. Dignity is the thing you hold on to quietly, in the ordinary spaces of your own life, when someone has tried to convince you to let it go. I held on. That was enough. I still think about that cedar box sometimes. The one Lorraine put in the basement, like it was clutter. A grocery list in Margaret's handwriting. Milk, apples, rye bread, the good cheddar. And that was worth nothing to her. That told me everything I needed to know. Long before the trust documents. Long before the slap. Long before any of it. The measure of a person is what they discard when they think no one is watching. I am not a man who believes that the universe settles accounts on our behalf. I don't think there is a ledger somewhere being balanced by forces outside ourselves. What I believe, what 67 years of living has taught me, slowly and sometimes painfully, is that the choices we make accumulate. They build a structure, invisible at first, and eventually that structure either holds or it doesn't. Lorraine built hers on the assumption that an old man would not pay attention. That assumption was her undoing, not mine. What carried me through those 14 months was not anger. Anger burned hot for about 3 days after that slap, and then it cooled into something more useful: clarity. I knew what was happening. I knew what I had to do. I knew that the worst thing I could do was act from fury, when patience would serve me so much better. That kind of discipline, sitting with what you know, moving carefully, not letting emotion drive the car, that's something I had to learn the hard way. Back when I was young and far less patient than I am now. It doesn't come naturally. You build it the way you build anything worth having, slowly, with a lot of mistakes along the way. The hardest part was Robin. It still is, honestly. Because Lorraine's choices were her own, and I can set those down. But Robin's choices were Robin's, and those I carry differently. I raised him. I was there. And somewhere along the way, he learned to look at the floor when the truth needed a witness. That is not entirely his fault. People teach us how to treat them, and I wonder sometimes whether I was too easy on him when he was young, too quick to smooth things over, too willing to absorb tension so he wouldn't have to feel it. What I know is that the Sunday dinners matter now. The roast chicken, the two of us at the table, the slow work of finding our way back to each other. He is trying. That counts for more than I sometimes let myself admit. I sing the thing I most want anyone to take from this. If they're sitting somewhere right now feeling overlooked in their own home, feeling like the ground is shifting under them, and they can't say exactly why, is that you are allowed to pay attention. You are allowed to trust what you notice. You don't have to wait until someone puts their hand across your face before you decide you've seen enough. Know what you have, understand what's being done with it, and hold on to who you are while all of it is happening. Not loudly, not with a speech, just quietly, every morning in the ordinary spaces of your own life. That's the whole thing, really. That was enough for me.